Do we want to do a round of intros or do we know each other enough?
I think we can do a really short one if you really want to.
Okay. Well, I can start. I am the product manager for Optimize, and I moved over into this role in October, I think it was. Dan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, Dan Jensen, backend engineering manager for Optimize.
Great. I'll go next. I'm Reed. I'm the product manager for the release team. I'm going to pass the baton on to Itzik, who I just sent him in Slack this meeting. He had no idea about it. So Itzik, introduce yourself.
Hi, good morning. My name is Itzik Baruch. I'm a senior technical marketing manager for the CI use case. And now over the past few weeks, I'm working closely with Reed. I'm doing internship for the product management role.
Ian, Nick, either of you can go next.
I'll jump in next. I'm in Cluster. I'm usually the product designer for package, but I am pretending to be for release as well. And so we do product designy stuff. Nick, over to you.
I think everyone knows me, but I'm Nick. I'm the designer in the Optimize team.
And we put together a quick agenda, which has me giving an overview of the roadmap for Optimize. And then Orit, if you're able to give us an overview of what you're working on for release for the roadmap, that would be great. And then just an open discussion about how we can work together and align on some design aspects of what we're working on.
Great.
I'm going to share my screen. Okay, have you got my screen? So there are a couple of main themes that we want to focus on for this financial year 22. And one is about DevOps reports and the other one is value stream analytics, but also bringing both of those things together. So DevOps reports is a feature that we've had. We've actually just released the MVC of it fairly recently. And it's a feature that shows users their adoption of GitLab and GitLab features across their entire organization. So right now that's an instance level feature, but we're working on bringing that down to the group level. And so that feature really targets the engineering director and business leaders and helps them understand which groups across their organization have adopted DevOps practices and how much, to what extent they've adopted GitLab. And another layer on top of that is within a specific tier, how mature is their adoption. So that can help them evaluate when it's renewal time, what return on investment they're getting out of GitLab to justify their renewal, and also to evaluate whether they should up their renewal to a higher tier. And then another aspect of that is overlaying that with value stream analytics to better understand how adopting DevOps practices improves cycle time for delivering value. So that's where it feeds into value stream analytics. And I think, Orit, you're probably fairly familiar with value stream analytics. So that's a feature where users can define what their value stream is and then create stages to evaluate their efficiency at delivering value and their quality. So in value stream analytics, we want to do a lot more things like adding more stop and start events so that you can define more stages and monitor trends over time to understand if you're getting better. And so I've got a couple of designs that I'm going to walk through for both of those two features, but we see a number of different areas where we can work with release. One is to highlight release features in the adoption feature. So let me just switch over to that. So this is a design that Nick did up recently, and I'm sure it's going to go through more iterations before we actually implement a final design. But the idea here is that we will have Devops and Sec broken out. And then within each of those, we will have DevOps stages, more as they align to the GitLab DevOps stages. And then within each stage, we can highlight different features. So within release, we could work with you to understand what some of the features are that you want to highlight within release so that users can evaluate their adoption of the release features. And then another way I think that we can work with you is to help drive traffic to some of your features. So within value stream analytics, we want to provide more drilling capability. So for example, setting up more start and stop events that relate to release type stages, and then allow users to identify potential bottlenecks within release and be able to drill into some of your features to understand why the bottlenecks are happening and to resolve them.
This is really exciting.
And then there's the Dora metrics as well. So Dora metrics are going to be a key piece. So you can see the Dora metrics down the bottom here where we show adoption by subgroup. And so we'll have a kind of a score of the adoption rate within each DevOps stage, and then the Dora metrics for that group. And so then that will allow users to sort by, let's say you're really interested in finding which teams are most effective at having a small lead time for change, then you can sort by the lead time for change column and see which DevOps features they've adopted to see if there's some correlation that's helping them to achieve that metric.
I think this is really nice, and it also ties in really nicely to things that we had planned for the Dora 4 metrics as well. But I'll let you complete it before we move on to our stuff.
Yeah, I was just going to show you the value stream design. Do you have any questions about this DevOps adoption design?
So this is something that we're going to kind of show both self-managed and SaaS users to show how many of their stages they're using and kind of say to them, hey, you're paying for so much more, look what you could use, like something sort of getting them to use more stages in GitLab, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we've heard a number of different use cases for this feature. Some other ones are, I need to identify which groups in my organization need training on release features because we can see they're not adopting them. And then I want to find which teams have adopted release features and are performing really well with release features, and then perhaps take some learnings from them to help adoption through other teams.
So one question that I do have is, I think this is great for like, I guess, small businesses, but if I'm a large enterprise and I'm using GitLab just for SCM, maybe even CI, but I'm using CD something else and I'm using, Splunk or whatever for monitoring, how does that come to play here? Do we show them like how much money they could save if they used GitLab, or?
We don't have that on the roadmap for this year. We don't have any plan to work on integrations this year to show data from other tools. And we don't have anything really around how much money you could save. Although I guess you could you could use this as a foundation for building that information out yourself.
We've also explored this in the past before you joined, Larissa, and like the business case for how much money you could save by replacing certain tools. And there is there's a thing on the marketing website which basically creates that business case as well by saying which tools are you replacing and so on. So that's something that could give us some inspiration. But yeah, I mean, in the short term, I think this is probably going to be a lot of work. But I think what you said, Orit, is a definitely a worthwhile thing to look at as well.
Well, maybe even as a first iteration, just link it to the marketing page.
Yeah. Okay, and then on value stream analytics, I think it's in the next release, we're building out an overview tab. And so the overview tab is where we're going to put the Dora metrics. So you'll go to the overview tab and it'll have the 4 Dora metrics right here. And then when you click on, so we're changing the navigation to this horizontal navigation and removing what exists today, which is some vertical tiles here that you can click on for each stage, so that we can put more stage related data on this page. And so when you click on plan, for example, we'd like to show a few key metrics that relate to plan, and maybe they are user defined metrics, or maybe we come up with some plan related metrics. So this is where the Dora metrics come in. And then in the overview stage, and maybe even in a release stage, this is where we'd like to support drilling in and linking across to some of your release pages and the Dora charts that you're doing.
And is this on a project level, on a group level, on an instance level, all of the above?
So right now, we have value stream analytics at the group and project level, but they're 2 different code bases. And so the group level value stream analytics is a much more sophisticated feature, but we are refactoring the project level value stream analytics to use the group code. So soon you'll start to see a lot more features showing up at the project level. Ultimately, it would be really nice to have it at the instance level too, but we're kind of waiting to see where that Workspace's plan lands.
And in terms of tiers, who gets this great feature?
Right now at the group level, it is premium, is that right? And then at the project level, it's core, I think. We are about to go through an exercise though to evaluate our tier strategy.
I have one more question that came up actually from a conversation that I had with Dan, and one of the issues, I can't remember to pull it up, but in terms of Dora 4, we had kind of a disagreement in terms of the tiering that we wanted to do. Without going into that discussion, I understand that Manage is supposed to introduce a workspace concept, which kind of shows you all the projects that you have within your organization as groups of, or subgroups of groups or something like that. Is that something also that you're exploring in terms of displaying this information?
Yeah, once they have a concept of workspaces, then we'd like to be able to show value stream analytics at that workspace level. I don't have a ton of information yet about what that's going to look like though, so we're just kind of waiting to see what happens with it.
Okay, I hugged up a lot of the time. Does anyone else have any questions that they want to ask? Okay, so maybe I'll share my screen and I'll kind of walk through what we wanted to do in terms of Dora 4.
Mm-hmm.
So It's a good thing that I wrote a presentation this week about it. But okay, so basically Dora 4, the whole intent of Dora 4 is to kind of decide what kind of performer you are. And the basic thing that they're measuring is velocity and stability, okay? Those are all the 4. There's 2 for velocity, 2 for stability. There's also a 5th, not going into that now. The whole idea why Dora 4 is so exciting for our customers is because DevOps doesn't really have a good ROI that you can show. They're putting a lot of money and investment in DevOps and their processes and their organizations, but it's not something that you're selling. So it's hard to get like a price tag on it and to understand what you're getting back. So these metrics are really good because you can kind of say, well, we're deploying so much faster, or we're wasting much less developer time, and that's hard. Green dollars, you can you know, convert those into money saved and so on. Also, like time to restore service, we may be losing customers because we have degradation or, you know, a buggy product and people just don't want to use it. So you could theoretically put dollar signs on them, but this is the closest that we have for a really benchmark industry standard for metrics. And why this relates to release is because I think the main pillar of release is continuous delivery. So anything around deployments and specifically production has to do with release. All environment management is release, deployments is release. And so since these metrics are tied to production, this is the connection that it has specifically to the release stage. There's a lot of things that are also related to monitor, because at least the way that we defined it, we tied a bunch of things to incidents and alerts. But everything has to do with production. And we in the release stage also added a bunch of stuff this year, like auto rollback that was based on incidents. And the idea is that you have post-deployment monitoring, you're checking how your production is behaving after deployment, after time, and you can take action and do things. So monitor and release in that sense are very close. They're also both in the ops section, so it makes sense. Also, CI is very close to it. And so when you think about it, like lead time for changes, which we defined as how long it takes for a merge request to be merged to production, also it has to go through CI, but it also, at the end of the day, has to get to production. So that's how it ties in. So a little bit about the definitions, and we kind of talked about this in the issues themselves, but I'm gonna go through it again. So I made a chart here about how Google defines the Dora 4 specific metrics specifically, and our interpretation at GitLab on what we're measuring. We also have a really interesting opportunity with Dora 4 at GitLab because we're a single tool application. We have all this information inside. And what I really liked with what you showed, Larissa, is if you utilize all the stages in GitLab, you can get all this information. And have it also as Dora 4. And people are paying a lot of money to get these Dora 4 metrics. They're integrating a bunch of different systems. And if we can show them that we have this integrated within, it could be a selling point for GitLab as well. So we have a really good momentum and a really nice opportunity with the Dora 4 metrics. And so you talked a little bit about the persona. There's 2 personas that we're targeting in Dora 4. The main one is the executive, the person who wants to look at their organization and say, I invested a ton of money in R&D and in DevOps, and I want to see, you know, a constant improvement over time. And so they're probably more interested in seeing what I would say would call instance level, you know, all their organizational information. And the secondary persona is the team leader or the team itself, that they want to see constant improvement over time, but they're very focused on their own work and not so much others. So those are the 2 personas. So going through the metrics, I have deployment frequency, which is defined by Google as how often an organization successfully releases to production. And the way that we did it is actually the same. It's the average deployment frequency to production over a specific date range. So user can select, at the moment we have, and I'll show you what the UI looks like in a minute, but the user can select, I don't know, let's say last week, the last month, the last date, maybe later on we'll customize it. But for the MVC, it's going to be hard coded. Lead time for changes. So the accurate definition is how long it takes for a commit to get into production, but I thought it was much more interesting to see merge requests, and every single customer that I talked to told me that merge requests make sense and that the specific commit that doesn't necessarily interest them. I do have that as an issue opened up, linked to the Dora for Epic, but I don't think we're going to pursue it unless there's a really big need and customers are going to ask for it. I think merge request is sufficient. And I think it speaks really nicely in the GitLab language because everything starts with an MR. So I think it's the right way to go. Change failure rate and time to restore service is something that we kind of discussed in the issues, but I do want to go through it and kind of talk about the starting point and where we can expand. So change failure rate by Google is a percentage of deployments causing a failure in production. And failure in production is a really wide term. You could say it could be every bug, it could be anything. So the way that we kind of interpreted that is the incidence count divided by deployment count, and that was Dan's new terminology for the way that we want to count it. And I really like it. First of all, I think similar to the goal of expanding stage usage, if we can get more people using incidents, that's great. And another thing that I thought is if we do want to expand it for non-incident users, we can. It wouldn't be the starting point. It would be like, I don't know, 10th iteration going down the road. We could do measure degradations reported in NMR. So sorry about that. I had a really nice example. I don't know why it's not linking anymore. I put it at the end of the presentation anyway, just in case that this would happen. So I don't know if you are familiar with when you have a merge request that's getting merged, you have a bunch of different reporting. So you have code quality, you have metric reports, security scanning. We could define degradation in any of these, being worse than the previous one. It's just a thought. We don't have to go that way, but it's just a thought that I had. Time to restore service is how long it takes for an organization to recover from failure in production. And also over here, we're gonna start with incidents. So the average duration of how long it takes to close an incident. And again, thinking about iteration 11 or 12, if we want to expand this for non-incident users, we could measure how many rollbacks occurred. And then you asked me, how do we define a rollback in GitLab? We really don't. The way that we do is we count the redeployment, if you can do a redeploy. And if the pipeline ID is an older one than the newer one in production, we can count that as a rollback. So that's a little bit about how we plan to count. The way that we're doing it is really systematically. So we're adding a project level API and building a chart to show this data in the UI, and then building a group level API and then showing that data in the group chart, okay? Now the API is really flexible. You can put any environment, the UI, we had some conversations about that, but we should display only production data for Dora 4 to be accurate. But the API kind of lets you do whatever you want. And maybe someday in the future, we'll also let users multiple select which environments they're interested in. I don't know, maybe I'm super interested in how many deployments my team is doing to a dev environment or to staging or to pre-production. I don't know, maybe it's interesting. Definitely not part of the MVC. And also over here, we have the flexibility to choose the interval that is interesting to look at, not the hard-coded ones that we have in the UI. Any questions up until now? Okay, so this is what it looks like today. This is already in production. So this is one of my example projects. And this is a project level graph. And you can see we have here last month, last week, last 90 days. You can see my deployments. I haven't been deploying very frequently, but at least it displays the data that we want to see. This is a little bit different than what you might have seen like a month ago, because we had 3 different charts that we were displaying, but we consolidated them all because the only difference between them was the timestamp. So we consolidated it and let the user select what they wanted. Bonus points. And this kind of ties into what you showed, Larissa. Not exactly related to Dora 4, but we also added support for release metrics on the group level. So you can see the number of releases I had in all my projects and the percentage of projects with releases. This would be release specific metrics. And this was actually just a really good starting point for us to introduce the CI/CD analytics for the group level. So the rest of the Dora 4 metrics will kind of add onto this page. Do I think that Dora 4 necessarily has to go under CI/CD analytics? The short answer is no. It should probably have its own dedicated page, but it was just easy for us to start from there because this is something that our group owns. And so it was easy to place it all there. We will probably move it out of there one day, but not as the MVC. I'm going to jump a little bit ahead. I do want to mention this, that even though we kind of talked about it also asynchronously, what is a production environment? So today, both value stream analytics and the Dora 4 metrics that we built heavily rely on the fact that you called your production environment production. That's not the best practice. First of all, there could be many production environments. Second of all, even in GitLab, we call our production environment GPRD. So we couldn't even dog food this internally just based on the name. So what we're going to introduce in this milestone is a way to make it really flexible. And in the YAML file, you can define the type. So you can name your production environment whatever you want. And then if the type is production, then we would display it in the Dora 4 metrics. If you don't, we'll just still rely on production. Okay, so a little bit about what we have planned. Ian, did we lose Ian? So never mind, so I will present in Ian's name because he did a really awesome job designing this. So at the moment, when we started, I'm gonna go back a little bit to the MVC. So for the MVC, our plan is to add all the metrics under Ultimate. It's not the end game, but that's our MVC. And that includes project level and group level API and UI charts for all the 4 metrics. Okay. Once we get all those in place, then we're going to open it up for all tiers to enjoy some part of Dora 4. So how will this look? For core users, what we want to do is we want to reuse the value stream analytics tile view for the metrics. So it'll show a numerical value for the project level analytics. That's it. These pipeline charts have been there around for forever, so it's not anything new. It's just an add-on. For premium, what we want to do is show project level analytics. We want to show the same thing that core shows, but also add the charts. So you'll see it's a little bit different than what I showed you today, because today we only support 1 metric, but we'll have theoretically the 4 metrics as different charts where you can check and select your timestamp that you want for each one of the metrics. And then for Ultimate, we'll have everything that Premium has and show it on the group level. Okay, that is the current plan. There's a bunch of other things that we want to do on top of the MVC. I'm going to just mention a few, but there's a ton. So support the workspace instance level, which we kind of touched upon when we talked about value stream analytics. The reason why we have a discrepancy between what we're showing in Premium and what value stream is showing in Premium is because our buyer, who is the executive, which is the ultimate persona, is really interested in the group, the organizational metrics. But it seemed not the right way to go to only show instance level metrics for Ultimate and only tie this down for self-managed users. We also have a goal this year to be SaaS first. So definitely to put SaaS at a disadvantage seemed like the wrong approach to go. Once we go Workspace, maybe we'll allow a group level in Premium, and Workspace would be ultimate, but I think there's still a ways to go before we make this specific decision. Gamification, this is actually really neat. What do I mean here? So we have a really unique position because we have a bunch of data from different organizations that we can anonymize and kind of show you where you're performing based on companies like you. So the idea is to say, in terms of this metric, you're a high performer based on companies that are like you, and companies that are like you, the definition could be they have the same number of seats that you have, or maybe the same technology, or I don't know, similar templates in your repo. I don't know. We can decide on that later. And then we could kind of give scores to how well you're performing and give you a badge in terms of performance. And I saw that also, Larissa, you showed a score. This could also tie in really nicely together with the score.
Yeah, this is something we've been thinking about too, is using those Dora 4 levels to show that badge using the Dora 4 definition of what elite is, but also do comparisons of your team against other teams in your organization. And then with Devops score, we already have a comparison using usage ping of just your organization compared to against every other GitLab organization that's reporting usage ping. We don't have the definitions of organizations that look like your organization yet, but I think that's a nice addition.
Cool. So I'm happy that we're on the same page. This is like future, really future, but we already have these issues, you know, lockdowns, just so that there's an idea there that anyone can collaborate on. And then, so this is the benchmark view of similar companies and groups. So very much like what you said, if I am looking at my organization, I want to know which team needs help, which team is like a really good example that people can learn from. There's a really interesting concept of getting your wings. I've read several articles about that in Devops today. And the more a team is doing better in terms of their DevOps score, the more things they can do, like deploy to production or things like that. They have to go through less hoops. And so this can also be a really nice concept of, my team is an elite performer, let's give them maintainer access to whatever. So we can also think about opening up different roles and permissions based on this score. So that could also be really interesting. In product tips and tricks to improve performance. So very similar to the chart you showed in terms of introducing new functionality that you don't know. So things that we were thinking about is, for example, let's say your time to restore is really long and you're not doing that well. We could show you that you can use auto rollback in that sense. And so that would eliminate waiting for someone to find there's a problem and then manually going in there and doing something. So we thought that based on the score that you get, we can introduce different GitLab features, sorry. So like auto rollback, or maybe if your lead time for changes is super slow, maybe we can identify where you have manual jobs and kind of tell you, hey, did you know that there's runbooks and you could do this automatically and still have it logged and compliant or whatever. So different ideas like that. Ability to select any or multiple environments on the chart we talked about. And this one is really interesting, which is the option to export historical data. So code coverage already has that today. And the queries are so long that they just let you export to CSV all the data and then do it in your own time. So I believe that these would be additional after the MVC things that we would start working on.
You're saying it's the SQL that gets exported?
It's something no, it's the result. So it's not the query, it's the result of the query.
Got it. Okay.
Good. That was me.
Thanks for the overview. There's definitely, I think we're thinking about a lot of the same things, and there's definitely some overlap. So I'm really interested in working together to make sure we're not duplicating, but kind of streamlining how we display some of this data.
Yeah, and I think it's also really important that we consolidate the data so that we're not showing different values. The last thing that I want is for a user to look at value stream analytics, see deployment frequency is 30, go into Dora 4, see that it's 60, which one is the right one? So I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, definitely. I had a couple of questions that came out of that, just little things, but well, okay, maybe I'll just jump right in. So one is you were talking about the APIs being at all in Ultimate initially, but we've been doing some work to help with those APIs, and I don't think we've been designing them for Ultimate. So like the deployment frequency API, I think the release team did, so that perhaps that is in Ultimate.
Yeah, and also the lead time for changes is something that the release team did.
I wonder if that's going to prevent us from showing the Dora metrics for premium users in Value Stream Analytics if the API is in Ultimate. I'm not sure how that works. And is that a problem that we're showing it in premium when you're not?
Maybe. Again, the reason that we wanted to show that in Ultimate was just to make it easier for the beginning for the engineers not to get like really confused about what they're working on when. So we're going to open it at premium. So even if it is a problem, it's a temporary one.
Okay.
And in any case, the tile view that you have in Value Stream Analytics, maybe that's the problem. Maybe we shouldn't show it at core at all.
We have to, because VSA was originally a community contribution at the project level.
So today, core do see the deployment frequency tile.
Actually, no, we haven't added it there yet. So I think that's I think the conversation was how much do we, because like Larissa was talking about earlier, we're trying to make the code base the same basically. But I don't think that would stop us from hiding certain elements in core, or not hiding, just not displaying them, not adding them there like we've added them at the group level. So actually, I think that'd be totally fine.
Another thing that I noticed when you were talking about the API is that you have specific date ranges. I think there were 30 days, 90 days, and something else. And we have a date selector where, so right now, deployment frequency, you can in Value Stream pick any date range going back as far as 180 days, I think it is. And then it will show you the deployment frequency metric for the dates you've selected.
So I definitely think we want to add a date selector. It's just easier to start iterating with specific ones. We didn't go to 180 because the performance was so horrible that we stopped it at 90. So I don't know how come yours isn't getting stuck, because right now in gitlab.com, like www, and in gitlab.org, if you try to get to CI/CD analytics, you time out. So I wonder how you overcome that in the Value Stream Analytics one, because we're refactoring everything like now just to get it cached or whatever.
I think we batch. I think we take the long date range and break it out into like 30-day chunks, and then we run the query for each chunk just to keep things faster.
That's good to know. So like last month, it wasn't that much of a problem. I think when we changed it to put all the charts together, all of a sudden the queries like went nuts. Last month it was fine. It loaded, maybe a little bit slow, but it loaded. So I think we would go to 180, like the mockups are designed for 180. So that's the same. And then we would probably add a date selector after the MVC.
So if we're going to pick up the other two Dora metrics, the APIs for those, is it okay for us to use the same date selector approach that we currently use?
Yeah, so the API itself, if you saw the query, the only problem was the UI. The query here is from to, like there is no.
Okay. Yeah, okay. All right, and Nick, I know you added that section number 3 in the agenda. Do you want to talk through some of those items?
We can do that at a later point. I think, Ori, you sort of just brought up the point of eventually we'll have its own Dora page, and I completely agree, because that's where you can dive into the detail of the Dora metrics and really sort of drill into what you want. And what we want in VSA is basically like an overview of the Dora, and then you can drill into another page if needs be. So I think it makes the most sense. So we're not repeating ourselves in what we're showing, is to probably break it out into a page and then figure out the best way to improve navigation overall between the pages.
Yeah, I agree. And something that we were also looking at was like, once you get the charts, they're a little bit naked, for lack of a better word. It's much better to have like annotations and to understand this was a date when the release happened, or here there was a feature flag that toggled, and here we had a deployment freeze, or there has to be some more information for people, especially if you're on the exec level. You want to open a chart and then automatically understand what's happening there. And so there's a lot of info that we have to add.
And one of the competitive advantages that GitLab has, as you said, being a platform unto itself and having all this information in it, is the ability to drill down and click into the actual information which is provided, which is shown within the charts. So what we're trying to do right now is create some sort of information architecture to allow that experience of drilling down and drilling back up again. So that's where I sort of see the usefulness of the Dora charts. So driving into the velocity type metrics and understanding what are the merge requests that are driving this metric down or driving this metric up, and using that to learn is, again, super important. So annotations, links to GitLab objects, links to GitLab stages, these are all things that are super useful. So I think, yeah, breaking out the Dora page would be super useful, because then you can create interesting workflows around like inquiries into ops, releases, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important enough to have its own landing page. It was just easier for us to start with.
Yeah. MVP or MVC, sorry. We're running over time right here. So what do we recommend for next steps in terms of, I think we're sort of aligned on what the directions are respectively. How do we ensure that we aren't working on the same things, and how do we ensure that we connect up our user experiences in a good way?
I think the key is close collaboration, and I think we have been doing that really well asynchronously. So Optimize team has graciously volunteered to work on the 2 other metrics, which is time to restore and change failure rate, while we're focusing on the other 2. So I think as long as we're not stepping on each other's toes, I think we're okay. If there is a change of plan, I think it's important for any one of the teams to kind of update the other team, and so they know that there's going to be a change. Similar to how we talked about the new concept of production, which kind of also affects value stream analytics in addition to Dora 4. So I think these are really critical collaboration points. And I think it's great. I think, this is how we get more value to our customers. So I would love to see more of this.
Definitely. I've been starting to CC you on a lot of things, and I'll continue to do that on as we go forward and create new epics and issues to break some of this work down, so that you know exactly what we're working on.
Great. And I think even once we complete something together, we could also like do a joint demo about it and get other people from the company to see it. So for example, for Dora 4, I have the delivery team really excited about starting to use it. Of course, we need to overcome the fact that we use GPRD as production and not production. So we have a first good step towards that. One small step for man, but one giant step for mankind. So I think also dogfooding this internally and showing how we use it in GitLab could be really, really, really beneficial.
That sounds great.
Super. Cool. We'll start asynchronous, and if there's anything that is bouncing back and forth, we'll drive that into synchronous meetings in some way or another.
Great.
Yeah, that
Larissa,
works.
if you could share this recording with me, I would love to share it with the team.
Will do.
Super.
Hey,
Thanks,
this is
everyone.
great. Sorry, this is great, all. I was really happy to finally meet you all.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
It's great
Ciao.
to connect on it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.